I'm so excited for today's topic, turning no into a negotiation. I don't think anyone who is a parent wants their children to hear how to do this because no means no when you're a parent, right? But in fundraising, it's so different, right? We have to be prepared to get just as many more no's than yeses, right? So we have to be prepared. We talk a lot about handling objections and how to do that. And so we'll spend some time on that today. But let's go ahead and move on into this first slide because I think this is just so important. We talk a lot about preparing for the ask, practicing the ask, knowing who's on the team, being specific in what we're asking, all the things, right? Making sure that we're quiet, that we have something to drink so we can wait and listen for the response, right? But it can be very easy to be focused so much on the lead up that we forget about the post ask conversation. And that is critical as we look at the things that might happen after a post ask. We can be so focused on getting to that point that we just, okay, wow, I made the ask. Okay. And we forget that there's still follow up, whether it's a yes, a no, a maybe, or what it is, right? So today we're going to be focused on what does the no look like? How do we actually handle that no? So next slide, please. I think the first thing to remember is that donor rejection is not personal. If you are at all like me and a pleaser, and you want to always please the person you're having a conversation with, it can feel very personal if you let it, right? So a donor no does not even mean that your pitch or cause was unworthy, y'all. It just might not be the right time. It might not be the right interest, all of those things, right? The timing could be off. Their circumstances could be different. Their priorities just might not be aligned. And guess what? That's okay. There's so many great causes out there, but we have to remember we could have had the most incredible pitch, the best cause in the world, have the best relationship, all the things, but something else could be off, right? You are more than the sum of your fundraising efforts. You could have put a lot of time into this, but it is not all for naught, right? We know that we're going to get more no's than yeses, right? Using the assumption that we're going to get one no for every 3 asks that we make, at least, right? We know that we have to schedule at least 3 times as many meetings to get the yes, right? So we should be expecting rejection more often so that then we're just delighted when we get the yeses, right? Anticipate the no's by having a robust list of prospects, right? If we know that we have worked hard to develop a prospect list and we have more than enough people to continue to talk to, and we're continually feeding our pipeline, and we're communicating with our volunteers, and we're making sure that every opportunity we get, we're asking, well, if you're not interested, who else do you know that might be? Or when you are interested, now that you know what you know, who else do you think we should talk to? If we're continually doing that, we know that we're going to have enough positive responses to reach our goals, right? But keep in mind that it is not personal. It's almost like when you get a no, be like, yes, I'm one step closer to a yes, right? I know that we don't want to get no's, but if we're making enough asks, we should be getting a lot of no's. So we should be feeling comfortable getting more and more comfortable getting them. So ultimately, it should be inspiring us to schedule more meetings and get those people on our prospect list because we know that we will get some no's, right? All right, next slide, please. What are we going to learn from the no's? We've got to refine our approach in preparation for the next ask based on the information we have, right? So sometimes we're like, gosh, I never saw that coming, right? I was prepared. I never saw that coming. What can I do to prepare for the next meeting so that I don't give them the opportunity to give me that same objection, right? That same no. I understand that the United Way just launched their massive campaign in our community, right? You get in front of it, right? So that they don't say, well, I just committed to this organization. I understand that. and we still have a great cause. So I know you're very passionate about that, but I know you're also passionate about us, right? It helps you be able to talk through that script. So, debrief on your meetings. Don't just be like, "Whew, made it through that. That sucks. I got to know. Okay, move on." Whether we get a yes or a no, we should be really kind of doing a debrief with whoever was in the meeting, or if it was just us, doing a debrief. What went well? What could have gone better? How could I be better prepared the next time? What is my next step with this person? Because a no is never just a no, right? There's always a something else that might be able to happen out of it sometimes. So what is that next thing if we deem that there's a valid next step? And so there's a very important debriefing after any no that we get. We've got to take that donor feedback and apply it to better understand their needs for future asks, but also potentially other people's, right? So we've got to look at it twofold. What could have I done better with them? And how can I take what I've learned and do a little bit better with the next person? So now is where you get to tell us about a no that you've received and what you could have done differently. Um, Absolutely happy to hear someone speak. There's the chat as well, but feel free to raise your hand and share with us verbally as well. Anybody excited to share about a no that they got? Come on,
No
no's
one
are.
is excited about that.
I'm like, nobody wants to.
Nobody will do it.
Come on, somebody tell us, even in the chat, what could you have done differently? What do you think factors influenced their decision?
Just know it wasn't about your self-worth. They were going to say no regardless. There was no magic words you could have said to have fixed it. Does that help frame it a little bit?
I'm getting a no right now. This is awful.
Okay, well, you can tell us
Come
about the
on.
time that you tried to get everyone to talk on the forum and you got to know.
Come on, somebody, nobody? You don't want to hear from me, just. Lisa, do you have a good no story?
I do. I have a few. And you might see my cat here. And we're very fortunate because I feel like, I don't know, they all had legitimate reasons. So we got one that said, it's kind of, we have a fixed income. This is based on the stock market. So we can't increase our gift because we don't know what we're going to be getting from the stock market later. So we said, okay, so that was one. Another one, we found out that the donors or prospective donors had just like signed up to be board members with other nonprofits. So we kind of went, oh, darn, I wish we had known that. And we're like, okay, fine. We still did get a gift from them, but I don't know how we could have prepped more for that, but yeah, so that was just kind of like, all right, well, good to know. And then one, we had a donor, a volunteer, and she actually said, actually we are overcommitted and I need to step back. And so we won't be able to do it. And we were like, well, darn, that was a double whammy. So I don't know. And so
Yeah,
that's what we dealt with.
I love it. And I would say in all of those, I'm not sure you could have done anything differently other than timing, right?
Right.
They all sound like they're still potential for a future, right? Like, okay, I need to step back right now. I'm overcommitted. Let them get some of their pledges paid off. Go ahead and keep them in your cultivation pipeline. Keep communicating your impact and stories and all of those things, right? So sometimes that is what we learn, that hey, I can take a no. It's not personal. And sometimes it's about timing, right? And so I'm going to keep this person in my prospect list and keep communicating with them. Thank you for sharing, Lisa. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I was having a hard time with my view to see actually who was like even on screen, and you were the first person I saw. So thanks for being a good sport.
Yeah, well, and honestly, I couldn't figure out how to like raise my hand. So I'm glad you noticed me.
I just felt the raising of the hand. Awesome. Thank you
Another
so
one in chat too, Marty, if you want to read that one.
Wonderful. I see Will has joined the chat. One just yesterday told me she was just diagnosed with breast cancer. Completely understandable. We'll check in over the coming months to see how she's doing. how incredible, very treatable, thankfully. I'm so happy to hear that, she's okay. But what a way to further that relationship by like authentically keeping in touch. It gives you reason to check on her, see how she's doing. And I suspect as you build a relationship, when the time is right, there's an ask that can be made there, right? So very, very appreciate you sharing that, Will. I got goosebumps. I mean, we are dealing with real people with real life stuff happening in their lives. We all have things that are vying for our attention every day, vying for our time every single day. And if we get the honor and privilege to sit down with someone and get a no from them, there was still something to be learned from it and still a relationship to be furthered. So thank you. All right, Crystal, no to naming opportunities. There was a but. So there was a not this, but. Do you want to share with that a little
Can
bit?
you elaborate just a little bit?
Further, Crystal? You're muted. I don't know if you were.
I was going to see if I could, I was going to see if I could say something. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, now we can. Thank you, Crystal.
Okay. Yeah. So I make the ask, and then there's of course the no to the naming opportunities, I guess because of the high dollar amounts. But the but are there any other amounts, And so that's the good news. I always try to aim for the higher dollars, but that but is encouraging to me because at least I can get something from them, at least something. So
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, because Crystal, what do we always say? Be specific and ask high.
Yes.
Ask higher than you think, right? And
Yes.
then you have that dialogue, and that's the conversation that happens after. So have something else in your back pocket. Make sure that you know what the next opportunity that might be more reasonable, or even ask them, well, if that doesn't work for you, what's a level that you might be considering, and know then how to respond with that. Because we have a special gifts club, or we have, this other naming opportunity that I also think you might be interested in. It's a little bit different level. So awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Warmed up on this Friday. Everyone's getting rolling. Well, with that, if there are no other fun no stories you want to share, I am going to hand it over to Jake so that we can talk a little bit more about how do we actually handle these no's.
Absolutely. So when we get a no, or when we're faced with the idea of getting a no, it will usually more often get in our own way with setting up the appointment in the first place. Like, the no is really the problem. It's our fear of the no happening that prevents us from even taking a shot. So we're like, well, I don't want to get rejected. We have so much value. And this is not a you problem or a character flaw. This is just like a human psychology thing where we value things that we have more than things that we don't have. Like the prospect of losing $15 is more impactful for us than the prospect of making $15. It's identical, $15 in net value, net worth the other way, but we'll work much harder, all of us will, to keep $15 that we already have, as opposed to taking a risk to go get $15 that we don't already have. That doesn't seem like money because we don't have it yet. So we're very protective. And depending on your personality, this could be even more exacerbated. The same is kind of true with donor prospects. We have a list of 10 or 15, and we say, well, if I don't have the right information, or if I go ask them early, I could lose them. I'm going to get a no, and then I have nothing. Right now, I have prospects who could give me money. This represents $1.5 million between all these asks. But if I start asking them and I start saying no, then I still don't have any money. I've wasted my time, and I don't have those prospects anymore. But you have to remind yourself that you're in the same place that you started money-wise, and you're actually further ahead because you've made progress towards identifying people who will support your mission, because you'll get some yeses as well. So that fear of getting turned down prevents us so much just from making progress, or from making progress at the speed that we're able to. And it's impossible to totally overcome like human tendency and human psychology, but it's kind of an exposure therapy thing, as in the more we do it, the more we realize that it actually is going to be okay either way. And as you get good at this too, you realize that you can get in the middle of a conversation and know that it's not the right day to ask, and it was a positive cultivation visit, and no usually means no, not right now. So the thing that we want to talk through in this slide, and I'll give some examples on how to actually respond to this if you're in a situation where you get this, is the types of no's that you get. You never get no without an explanation. As Lisa mentioned, or as Will mentioned, people will give you the reason. There'll be a no, and here's the reason, here's the follow-up. It's never just like no silence. This is not tricky sales psychology we're going to use to kind of trick them out of their money. This is a collaborative interaction at all times. Like, it's not like they win, you lose, or vice versa. Hopefully everybody wins in the situation. You're kind of allowing them to find a space where they can connect with the mission. You know, they have an abundance of resources and they want to be able to be a part of something. And that's hopefully what you're able to help them do. So it's never just a simple refusal. It's just kind of often will carry kind of other underlying objections that aren't actually no. And sometimes they'll kind of give you those outright. And sometimes they say, well, we don't want to give, but you can still push a little bit further and try to figure out what those are. But those types of no's usually are within a certain amount of categories that you can have prepared answers for. Now, this can kind of happen naturally over the course of a fundraising career as you get better at this. You kind of naturally know how you respond to certain types of no's, and you kind of instinctually can do it. But as you're first starting out and you're not asking that much, it's helpful to have a handful of prepared answers of like, when they say this type of no, I say something like this. When they say this type of no, I say something like this. And actually to kind of journal and write these out on your own goes a long way. It can feel a little silly, but it just really is helpful just to kind of give you that confidence of like, I'm going to say this, and they're only going to say a series of things. Like it's a decision tree, if you're familiar with that concept. A decision tree, like I say this, and there's 3 lines that branch off of that. Yes, no, and maybe. And then the yes has a couple of branches off, the maybe has a couple of branches, and the no has a couple of branches. Well, if you can predict what all those branches are and what you're going to say, whether you get a yes, no, or maybe it doesn't matter, because you're already prepared for the next step in the conversation. You're already ready to go with the flow of it. So you just kind of prepare these handful of responsibilities and possibilities. It's maybe a dozen of them. It's not that many. And just kind of be able to show genuine concern. And when you get like, hey, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, it's like, that wasn't on my decision tree. That was kind of specific, but you can have a general category that's like, I'm experiencing a life event that prevents me from giving. Like that encompasses a lot of things, like a relationship or a death in the family, or, you know, illness, I'm having to move, bankruptcy, like all those can kind of fit into one category, and you can have kind of a canned, prepared answer to this. So we have lots of these, and we have a longer workshop that we go through and kind of talk through a couple dozen of these. But here are some of the big ones, kind of say a big 3 that we tend to get a lot, we can kind of talk through. I'm not considering supporting any charities. Like, I'm just not giving. That's not actually a reason. We can actually use that one to dig deeper. Like they're just stating a fact. Like that's not a because. Like I'm saying no because I'm saying no is not a reason you're saying no. Like you're just kind of repeating it again. So you can just get curious. Oh, you're not supporting. Tell me a little bit about that. Is this something that you are kind of doing recently, or is, and you can ask it a million different ways to make it sound natural. But that one is one where just be ready to say something back to it, because that's not actually a reason. It's just something they'll say. A really common one, and you know, if whether they're joining another board or they've already got their giving, saying, hey, we are, you know, loyal supporters of lots of different charities, but we just started a big pledge towards our college or this other charity in town, or we're committed paying on this right now. That happens a lot. More than likely, you're going to find people who are already philanthropic and already giving in a lot of places. We very, very rarely find someone who doesn't ever give anywhere, and suddenly we convince them to give a big gift to our organization. They've never been a philanthropist ever anywhere, and suddenly they're just very compelled by the magic words that we're saying. Doesn't really happen very often. You're finding people who are natural givers anyways. They've been giving to, you know, 2 to 7 charities rolling average over the years for a long time. And we just kind of have to be next in line and make the most compelling case, or, you know, find something that draws at their heartstrings. But you're going to get this one a lot because you're asking people who are philanthropists, and those philanthropists are going to be giving in places already. So you can ask kind of when that pledge is up. You can commend them on being generous to charities. You can compliment the other charity for being a great organization that does great work. And you can ask for when you're allowed to follow up, saying, hey, would it be all right if I just kind of keep you posted on the progress of our campaign, and I can check back with you like maybe in like October to kind of see where you're at with your current pledge? Yeah, that'd be fine. And if they genuinely mean it, they'll let you know. Yeah, happy to check back in October. You set a calendar reminder and you're right back in it. No did not mean no. It was just a not right now. And then the last one, again, I think Lisa had a version of this one as well, is financially it's not feasible right now, but consider me for next year. Like we can't increase our giving because of the stock market, because we're on a fixed income, because this, and this. And in that case, we can give different options. We can offer pledge payments, same thing. We can circle back in an amount of time. It's not about we're going to find the right words to negotiate and change their minds sitting across from them in that moment. It's just like, because they said no, they're not destroying this relationship, and neither should we. Like, they are not saying, we don't like what y'all do, we would not support your charity, we don't believe in the cause. We're just like, oh, we would love to give, but there's this actual legitimate reason that we're not right now. And we're so sorry. And instead of us being like, well, we're burning the bridge, that's it, on to the next donor, we take shots at everybody. It's like, do what you can to keep cultivating that relationship, and you never know what happens down the road. If you're doing this constantly, by year 2 of the campaign, before you're even halfway done, you have the opportunity to go, all those no's you got in the beginning, you can go back in the next year. They've already heard the pitch. They already know what your campaign is about. You've hopefully kept them informed, invited them to stuff. So it's not about like, oh, we built it up to the ask and we got the no. Okay, they're off this list, and on the other one, we go to our next ones. It's like, nope, they're just in the forever cultivation stage. We're just going to keep going on them. And they know more than someone who has never heard of us, and we got the chance to meet with them. And it's not, we have to be disingenuous about it. Like, we can be legitimately polite and kind, and people tend to respond to that really, really well. So just know that it sometimes will push it on the road, which is why we stretch our campaigns over multiple years. A lot of times, a lot can happen in a year. They could get disgruntled with their other charity. They could run into more money. They could have a situation where they have a tax burden that they didn't think they had before. The stock market could go up or down. There's all kinds of stuff that we can't predict. So we just want to kind of keep our eye out for that, and just know that the no isn't the, I'm severing the interrelationship, this is it for me. It's just, today, that gift that you just asked for is not a good fit. But that's it. That's the only thing they're saying no to. There may be a couple exceptions to this. People get mad at you, but very rarely does that happen. The fact that they're meeting with you at all kind of is an indication that they're interested in supporting you in some way. If your title is development director or major gifts officer, and they agree to have lunch with you, what do you think they think the meeting is about? Like, they know you're not sneaking up on these people. So we just have to keep that in mind and say, hey, the fact that they're even sitting down for lunch with me means they want to know what we're doing. They support all kinds of causes. They're just kind of considering this one. They're always kind of looking ahead to where they give next and where they give big and all of that. And I just want to use this as an opportunity for a cultivation touch point. All right, next slide. So this is, good therapy psychology. This is good communication outside of relationships, outside of fundraising. You always want to use this kind of stuff when you have any kind of an objection, just with people in general. So feel free to steal this for fundraising, or feel free to steal it with using with your spouse or your friends or your family or your kids, however you want to do it. When someone comes up with an objection, the first thing, and this is the most skipped step, is to mirror and reflect their words back to them. So we can practice exactly what this would sound like, but you want to say back their words almost one-to-one back to them without repeating it exactly. In some cases, you can repeat it exactly. It may sound a little robotic, so you almost want to kind of like re-language and kind of summarize it back to them. It's just an indication that you were listening very clearly and you heard what they said. Doesn't do much. It just kind of relaxes them and help everybody feel like, okay, it wasn't that just that I was saying the words and you were waiting for your turn to speak, but you were actually trying to comprehend. And now you're confirming with me, hey, this is what you said, right? Like, this is what you're trying to get across. I just want to make sure that I'm on the same page. The second thing you want to do, which is also often skipped, but most people will sometimes skip to right to this step, is to acknowledge why that's okay. So I think the best way to kind of describe this is to give an example. So if someone were to ask me for a gift and say, I'm so sorry, Marty, we're actually paying on a pledge right now towards the College of Engineering, and that's not going to be up until early 2025. So we can't commit anything right now. All of our money for 2024 is committed to the College of Engineering. So Marty, as the fundraiser, might say something back like, oh, it's so great that you support the College of Engineering. Like, she didn't repeat my sentence exactly one-to-one back to me, but I now know that she knows that she understands. I know that she knows that I know. We're connected in the way that, like, she's heard me. This is like another way, like phrase that's used a lot is I believe you. This one's a little bit more relationshipy, but it's the same kind of thing. It's just not like, oh, I understand. I understand. Like, that's a common thing that comes out of our mouth when someone's telling us something. Oh, I understand. I understand. Is to kind of repeat that. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You shouldn't avoid using those words, but a little better, instead of just saying that you understand, is to demonstrate you understand by saying those words back, almost one-to-one. Yeah, it's so great that you're able to support your college in that way. Again, second thing you want to do is then empathize or acknowledge why that's a great thing. They do wonderful work over there. I'm actually a little bit familiar with some of the research projects they've been up to. It's so cool that you're able to support those projects because they're able to do X, Y, and Z. So it just qualifies why that decision that they made is a good decision. Again, you don't want to disagree. And the reason we do this is if someone says no and they're already feeling a little bit hesitant about the interaction, or they're like, oh, I have to turn them down, and we immediately be like, you're wrong, and like throw that at them, that's not a good relationship building tool. Like, we're not going to get the gift right now today anyways. So it's not about using a psychology trick to turn it around. It's just making them feel heard and empathize with them, and then affirm that decision as to why it's okay that they made that decision. So again, mirror the language. You kind of want to repeat it back a little bit one-to-one. Second thing is just qualify why that thing that they chose is a good thing to have chosen. And then offer a solution. You know, we love to be solution-minded. I'm very solution-minded. This is my tendency as well. I have to work on this constantly. But if you skip right to solution, it comes off, or it can come off as abrasive. So just a couple of sentences first, and then solution third of, would you be all right if we just kind of kept you posted over the course of the next year for the progress of our campaign, kind of what we're up to? And then I'm happy to circle back with you sometime, you know, around the end of the year as you're wrapping up that pledge. And if they feel heard and understood, and they feel like you're on their side, and you've acknowledged why giving to the College of Engineering instead of their charity is a good thing, they're much more likely to be like, yeah, you know what? Keep us posted. We'd be happy to meet with you Q4 and kind of see, because, you know, we'll be trying to making some decisions about our January, February giving around that time. It's like, great. That's not even a no at that point. That's just another step towards that yes that we're getting. We didn't actually even get turned down. We're just like extending the timeline. That's why we have a 3-year campaign. That's why we're doing that. So does anyone want to practice this? We'll give you a super easy one, and we'll leave this up on screen so you can walk through the steps. Does anyone want to give this a shot? I'll give you a super easy way that people say no, and you just try mirroring, try empathizing, and then offer a solution in that order. Anyone want to take a shot? Will, let's do it. So Will, ask me for a $50,000 pledge over 3 years to support Heiser.
Sorry. Jake, we've been talking about Heiser for quite some time and what we do, and we know you deeply care about the children that we serve here at the school. So I would like to propose that you support our comprehensive campaign to ensure these kids continue to get the best services they can by pledging $50,000 over the next 3 years. Is that something you would?
Well, I appreciate you
Like to do.
asking me, Will, but 50,000 is probably a little more than I was thinking I would give. I'm just not liquid enough. I got 3 kids in school, in college right now, and I just can't afford to do that much cash per year right now.
I totally understand the situation you're in with 3 children. A big consideration. Is a pledge over a longer period of time something you would like to consider as far as paying at your own pace when you're able
Actually,
to?
yeah. If I had 5 years, I think I could get that done. I think that's a great solution to offer. So like, again, mirroring the language, he said a lot of the words back to me, offered why that was okay, understand why that's, you know, it has to come first, family first kind of thing. And if you had a couple more years, if you had 5 years, you know, would that make it a little bit easier? So that was a perfect step all the way through. Anybody else want to take a shot? Well done, Will. All right, one more person. I know it's scary. All right, we'll circle back to the end if we have time. No worries. Yeah. Appreciate all of y'all who have participated so far. So just as a way to kind of wrap some of these things up, again, kind of keep those things in mind. If you don't want to practice on a webinar with a bunch of other fundraisers, I would highly encourage you to practice just, again, you can do it with a journal. Like you can do it writing it down of just like, hey, if they say this, I'm going to say something in this space. If they say this, I'll say something in this space. But we want to have at least something so that you're not having to think on the fly on how to do that the first time you get it. So it's just having a couple of reps that are very low risk that you can try and make mistakes and be like, ooh, I should have said this, or, you know what, I could actually talk about this thing. And again, don't even have to do it out loud with people. You can do it in a journal, in a composition notebook, however you want to do it. A really, really great way to practice. So just a couple of strategies for people who are being indecisive. This is like another scenario we get. Trying to get open-ended leading questions. We try as much as we can to be like, oh, I'm going to talk about our mission and tell you about how great we are. The best asks are about 50-50 in terms of dialogue. Like if they're talking about as much as you're talking, that's a pretty successful ask because it's a conversation. It feels to them like it's collaborative because it is, but you want them to feel like they're not being pitched at of like, I'm going to tell you all the great things that we're going to do. And then you get to decide yes or no. It's like they know what's happening. So if you're asking them questions about the type of things they support or what kind of legacy they want to leave, or just kind of open-ended, like, well, what are the different programs? And maybe you talk about a couple of things you have. You know, we've got a bunch of stuff that we're doing. Out of the stuff, that what do you feel like is the most important thing that we're working with right now? Or what do you think is the most important strategy, initiative, et cetera? Just asking them questions so that you can get information, A, but it also helps them kind of talk themselves into what's important to them and help them kind of vocalize it out loud. And you don't have to do this with any kind of sneaky or aggressiveness. It's just having more of a conversation. So you're envisioning and you're structuring the ask as a back and forth instead of a sales pitch. It just makes it come across way better. It's more comfortable for everyone involved. You will enjoy that more. The donor will definitely enjoy that more. It helps a ton. Do want to try to avoid, this is an easy mistake to make, what we call confrontational queries. Instead of asking directly, what do you need to think about? It's like, oh, I need to think about that. And then for you to come back, well, what do you need to think about? It's like, well, I just reflected their language. I said, think about it. It's like, that this is, I get it. Maybe you follow it to the textbook, but that comes off as a little bit pushy. So maybe to consider something a little more soft, considerate language. So instead of what would you need to think about, I would say, yeah, Lisa, happy to give you some time to kind of consider this. I know this is a big ask. When we meet next, maybe we can have a couple of weeks to give you time to speak with your financial advisor, your spouse, your family. What are the biggest questions that you feel like you're going to have for our next call, so I can make sure that I prep enough answers? In that case, that will often prompt them to talk about the things that are actually most important. So instead of what do you need to think about, I'm asking that same question, but I'm just saying, you know, when we come back in, I can come by your office next Thursday. What materials, what data, what do you need to help kind of make a decision one way or the other? And then they'll kind of tell you, they'll tell you the things that are most important to them. Well, you know, we want to make sure that the margins of the charity are really good, and you know, all of our money goes to the mission. And I don't even want to respond at that point. Say, okay, great, we'll get you that data. I happen to know that, you know, our margins are really good and our overhead and our admin costs are low, but I don't even want to fire that out right now. I'm not trying to win them over in that moment. I just want to make them feel heard and say, oh yeah, I can get that for you. So that way, when you show up, you have the things that are important and impactful. It's the same thing. It's still asking, what do you need to think about? I'm just not using those words in that way. Whenever we end those conversations, we always want to have some sort of specific time-bound follow-up. Even it's like, you know, we'll check back in with you in October or early next year. But just to have some kind of specificity, I can't even say the word, specificity, have some kind of specificity. So always going to propose some kind of next steps with a date and time. If it's short, like if it's within 2 or 3 weeks, like I'm picking a specific day, I'm going to pull up my calendar and say, hey, I got my calendar here right in front of me. Just so that we're not having to track each other down. Does a week from Thursday work for you? I can come by your office, or we can meet somewhere and try to get the appointment set so that you're not playing phone tag. It's just much easier for everybody. It also helps gauge interest kind of right then and there. If they're super hesitant to put anything or commit any kind of timing on the calendar in the next couple of weeks, if you try to follow up with them, they probably will end up ghosting you, or you're going to have a hard time getting. So almost by asking for that follow-up next appointment, you can gauge how interested they actually are, or if they're just trying to like be polite and get you to go away, which is okay. We want to know either way. What is the case that they're actually interested and we can actually follow up? We want to set that appointment. And if they're not interested, we want to spend our time with other people who are more closely tied to that mission and more excited about your project. So us like constantly trying to chase these people who are not showing interest is not super helpful. So it just kind of helps qualify that no one more time. Question from the chat: any feedback around those who meet reluctantly and say they will meet with us, but not as big donors, and say that's totally fine. Again, it's the same kind of thing. So you would reflect, you would say, totally understand that you're not in a position to make a big commitment right now. That's me reflecting. I didn't exactly say those words, but I'm saying what you said back to me. So we know it's a big ask, and you have to be selective these days about which charities you're supporting and when. I'm qualifying why that's okay and saying, you know, what we can do is just sit down with you and just share a little bit about what we're doing, the campaign progress, some of the things we're trying to accomplish. That gives you a chance to evaluate if this is even something that you'd be wanting to support. Very soft ask of like, yep, totally get it. Not going to ask you for money, but I do want to share a little bit about the campaign. And then when you get the meeting, you can sit down with them and just ask them a lot of questions about the kind of things they like to support and why. What's their why? What are the things that excite them? And then maybe one visit after that, you can come back with a specific ask. But again, none of this is, I'm going to steer and turn this conversation so that I've got it dialed in exactly for this visit. Like I go into the lunch appointment and they're going to say some stuff. And then I got my psychology tricks that I learned from Jake and I'll turn that into a yes. It's usually we're going to optimize for the relationship, not the outcome in that moment, and then try to get a specific follow-up thing or appointment or something down the road that we're just using it as a cultivation touch point. Maybe it's a no, but it was a great cultivation visit. They felt okay about saying no. They came away from the meeting feeling very positive, and we're reinforcing that with them that we're not going to be pushy. We're going to be collaborative. We're going to be transparent so that the next time we have an opportunity to ask, we might get that yes. It's never a no. It's just a not right now. Just always keep pushing down the road. But it was still worth it to have had the meeting. Like we can't let the no be like, well, I knew it. I knew that I was going to get turned down. That's it. I'm not setting any more appointments next week. It's like, no, wrong lesson. It's the wrong lesson to take away from this. Like you still got to take shots. It was still incredibly valuable for you to meet with that person and keep the relationship moving. How would you ask them to be a connector too? That's another great solution for that. It's like, hey, I know you can't give or you don't want to ask right now, but can you help connect us to a couple of folks who might be interested in what we're doing? Great pivot. Great pivot. All right. Any final questions? I know we're 1 minute late. Apologize for that. And I'll turn it over to Marty while y'all are thinking of your last minute questions so she can talk about kind of what programs we have in the coming weeks and months, and we'll get out of here.
Thanks so much, Jake. Any questions? All right. You know where to get us if you have them.